For one of the most iconic places in the world, Manhattan is pretty nonsensical. I've been there a few years ago, and it was legitimately one of the worst and weirdest experiences of my life. And I would like to wake up the sheeple who think that Manhattan is the example of life and not the exception. So for anyone who is listening, you should know why this little island is such a weird show. First of all, it's such a small island. Granted, it's a hell of a lot bigger than any video game tries to make it seem, but even then, the real island is quite tiny in comparison to other islands. The island itself is only 23 square miles long. Only 23. Liechtenstein is only 62, so Manhattan is barely a third of the smallest country. I think. I don't actually remember if it's the smallest anymore. We have too many countries. Don't take that out of context. But hey, this isn't my tyrant video, so I won't get into that issue. I don't know why such a small island is deemed so important. This is America, where we don't understand the difference between great as a quantity and great as a quality. Why is such a tiny thing so important? That's like us worshipping the Scotty dog as our national animal, or using Mini Coopers in our everyday life, unironically and not being ashamed of it. I wonder, what did it look like before all the buildings and all of the streets, in prehistoric times where it was just grass? It would have looked incredibly underwhelming. Just a little dollop of dirt surrounded my rivers. Cool. Good job, geology. You wasted so much effort making an island that is like 2 feet from the rest of land and is super tiny. It's like a little kid that went to its room and locked the door in anger, but instead it just made a river between itself and the rest of the land because it didn't get the Xbox it wanted. Plus, it's worth mentioning that the whole place just looks like a knife. Like a little butter knife sticking into the ocean. That's just another example of how river erosion can do extremely weird shapes. Like Italy. Why is it a boot? Or Hawaii. Why is it a spoon? Why does Texas look like Texas? That's less of a river erosion based critique, more of a complaint of Texas in general. Get your shit together, Texas. What I don't get is why set up so much in Manhattan? What pioneer looked across the river to a small island and went, this is where we build the center of our city? What 1800s businessman said, this will be the center of our businesses? And what M&M mascot said, this is where we will put our most prominent store? Was it the red one? It was probably the red one. Damn red. Why is that little divot up there too? Manhattan is usually depicted as roughly rectangular, but actually has a little line up top. The rivers that formed there must have been super drunk. Like the river diverged to the side and the first river said to the second, "Hey, where are you going, man?" And he, drunk, was like, "I'm just gonna go over here for a bit." And the first one said, "We need to stay on course." And the other one was like, "You know what? I'm gonna go even more to the side now." And then the distance between the two rivers rapidly expanded. Remember, kids, don't drink in a road. For such a tiny little island, there are so many people, like so many. I'm surprised the footsteps of all the people haven't just ground the whole island to dust. There are 1.6 million people in the city. That's more than some states and quite a few countries. That's because it's hell. It's literally hell. Jam-packed with people, thousands across. You can never meet people in a place so popular. Every time you see a face, it will disappear into a crowd never to be seen again. It ends up leading to an example of the idea that an overflow is equivalent to an absence. If there are too many people, there might as well be none at all. The people who live there must not know what it's like to walk outside on their own. The pandemic must be most confusing for that reason alone. Imagine going your whole life without ever being able to walk on an empty path. Do you think they even know what sidewalks look like? There is zero evidence that the people there have actually seen pavement before. The amount of feet covering has blocked their view forever. Hell, most of them have probably never seen a river that was blue either. Do you think their shoulders naturally get thinner from being crushed? It would make sense if you went to Manhattan and everyone there just looked like Slender Man. It's a bunch of extremely thin, crammed people from years of being boxed in like that. It would look like a wet dream to some conspiracy theorist. And with all those people, there must be so much CO2. How much of our atmosphere would we save if we just removed Manhattan from the equation? I'm surprised people can even breathe over there. Seems like a matter of health concerns. Plants would love all that CO2 though. Good for them. Good for them. For something so small, with so many people, it seems completely void of logic to use up so much space on a park. A park. There's enough idiocy with the proportions of this place. They just go and make it worse by throwing in an overgrown cabbage patch in the middle. How much housing could there be in its stead? New York builds their buildings very tall, so if they did that there, they could house so many more people, but then it would be even more populated. At first I thought it would provide more space for people to walk around and thus be less crammed, but then I realized it just makes more population. Because New York doesn't make any sense. It would just increase the smushedness. Okay, so that clearly isn't a good idea, but there still must be better things for that place. Maybe make an even bigger zoo. There is a Central Park Zoo, but it's surprisingly small, much more than it should be. And an entire Central Park-sized zoo would be awesome. Just think of all the potential species and habitats you could have. The humans think that the animals are the ones in the zoo, not the other way around. Wait, I meant the animals. Yeah, the animals are in the zoo. It's not like Manhattan is a secret human zoo run by the Illuminati. Of course not. New idea. What about an amusement park? Massive skyscraper-style roller coasters. In fact, that would be an interesting way of handling the traffic problem in that city. Just install massive roller coasters between buildings, then everything won't be so cramped. See? It's genius. There's no way this sort of city-wide thing could ever go wrong. Maybe they could do a sports arena instead. Manhattan is obsessed with sports and living under the boots of 1950s stereotypes, so a sports arena would be something the citizens there would ogle over. Maybe you could hold multiple fields all in one with how big it is. Or maybe one final idea, what about a massive haunted mansion? That place would be huge. A place so big it could fit a veritable country of ghosts inside of it. What would a ghost country look like? Would they need an economy? Would they need an economy, or would it work like communism? Or would it have some very old-fashioned ideas that we probably would go to war over them without even realizing the same amount of weirdness is happening here? There would be a lot of ghosts in Manhattan, if ghosts were real, though. Just with the population, 1.6 million. That's too much. It's too crowded. Not just the people, but with everything. Manhattan is so jam-packed that its motto could just be the word oversaturation. There's just a shit ton of buildings. If I count right, and by count I mean Google, I can tell you that there are about 1 million buildings in NYC, and most are in Manhattan. That means there are more than 500,000 on that little freakazoid island. Not to mention how many cars there are. The streets are almost always completely stopped with how many taxis they are. They might as well just take my roller coaster idea, because that might actually be a better traffic system. Then, we get to those little flying rats, or as they insist on being called, pigeons. They might just outpopulate teenagers on TikTok thinking they can become celebrities, which is real rich coming from a YouTuber. But those pigeons are just everywhere. What's their plan? Do they even have a plan? Will they survive a nuclear explosion? Then we have a pigeon-based society? Or maybe that's exactly what they want. And then, the final nail in the coffin of overproduced set pieces for Manhattan the movie is damn pizza places. Why so much pizza? I like pizza too, but come on, it's like they can find some extremely unique pizza formula each time. I bet there's one guy that owns like 5,000 smaller pizza companies, and is laughing to the bank while people argue which specific restaurant is better. And when the buildings aren't for pizza, they're about 50,000 feet tall. Such tall buildings for no reason. It's like they're obsessed with screwing over all those pigeons by taking away their flying space. But they need to be more considerate of others and the buildings they might affect. Like kaiju. Think of the kaiju. What if Godzilla trips? That would be rude of you, Manhattan. He's just trying to get around, and you keep getting in his way. Back off. Let them strut their stuff uninterrupted. #KaijuCatwalk. The TMNT would not be able to parkour. They are only able to jump from one similar sized building to another. So they can't jump up to a skyscraper, they'd fall, and then we'd have turtles on their backs, and that's always a depressing visual. Seriously, the only person that this is good for is Spider-Man. It's like he commissioned the whole situation, and he could have the coolest web-swinging experience. Well, guess what? I've looked up about 50 swingers clubs in New York, and I bet it's more fun swinging from ropes there, genius. What do you mean it's a different type of swinging? I bet the contractors must be upset. It can't be easy building such a tall building. I mean, you have to stack so many cards just to make it that tall. So when you have to do it with wood and stone, it just seems like there would be better avenues if they made buildings downwards. There are a few skyscrapers that are going to not be populated for very long, honestly, so it should be noted the kind of afterlife that buildings have. What I'm saying is, I wonder if Trump Tower is going to become a spirit Halloween.